On our morning show today from WRCO, we have Senator Sarah Keyeski of the 14th Senate District in the studio with us to talk about all the things going on in the Badger State. Thanks for making the trip today, Sarah.
You're welcome. Good morning.
Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
In
Lovely
June,
to be here.
June Dairy Month, right?
Oh, June Dairy Month. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I love me a June Dairy Day breakfast.
You've had a sample or two of them.
Over the years, yes. I mean, we used to help local farmers even get their farms ready back in the day, right? When I lived on a dairy farm and local people would have the dairy breakfast. And so, yeah, I've been going to them since I was a kid, and I still go to them and try to volunteer when I can.
I think agriculture topics near and dear to you, and you've been, I think you helped author a few bills lately that help agriculture, didn't you?
Yeah, one of the things that's been really important to me, so I'm on the Agriculture and Revenue Committee, and small family farms are particularly close to my heart because that's what I grew up on. I grew up on a small dairy farm in Cashton, Wisconsin. And so doing what I can in ways to promote bills, to write bills and author bills that are supporting our small family farms is important. So I had two bills. Unfortunately, neither of them made it to passage. Which, is part of the way that right now our legislature works, where if it's a Democratic bill, it doesn't get really the light of day, which is really unfortunate. But I just kind of want people to understand what I'm trying to do, where I come from. One of the bills was a dairy cattle innovation program, and it was working on having DATCAP provide no interest loans to eligible milk producers in Wisconsin. And those loans could have been used to improve farm efficiencies, animal care and health, milk quality, to reduce environmental effects associated with nutrient management or other dairy activities, or to rent or build buildings or technology necessary to expand the dairy operations capacity or its nutrient management systems. So those loans, they were loans that would not be able to exceed $500,000, $500,000, would have to have a term of 10 years, and they would only go to farms that had less than 999 cows. And so, again, kind of focusing on the smaller operator. That dairy cattle innovation program, it was called SB 323. It did pass the Senate Ag Committee, so that was great. This one was a GOP bill that I helped pass through the committee, and then it went to a floor vote, and I voted for it on the floor in the Senate. But unfortunately, Republican leadership on this one in the Assembly just didn't even bring it to the floor for a vote, and so it died. And that's one of those examples of where government, I think, breaks my heart because I was really excited about this one, and it got nowhere. So hopefully we'll try again next session. There was another one that was that I helped co-author, which was a dairy grant program. It was a pilot program where DATCAP would help create like dairy resilience investments, essentially. So it was a grant program, again, where dairy producers with under 1,000 cows would be able to get this grant money to improve their operational efficiency and resiliency, kind of similar to what we talked about earlier. That one, again, did not get a hearing on either side of the aisle, unfortunately, or I should say in either chamber. So it didn't get a hearing in the Senate or the Assembly, even though I'm on the agricultural committee. It didn't even come to my committee to even get a vote. And so again, because I'm not in charge as a Democrat of that committee, I don't get to decide what bills are heard. That's a Republican, and Republicans decided not to even hear that bill. And so, again, I just want people to understand that it's tricky because I have to say sometimes, I haven't been able to get a lot done. And I want people to understand that I'm trying, right? I have lots of other examples, but maybe it gets a little bit boring to hear about all these bills. But it's important to understand how our legislature works, how committees work, how committee assignments, how bill disbursement, how votes, all of that works. And that's one of the reasons why I'm having these transparency talks. So I'm going to flip to that for a second. I'm going all around the district and having what I'm calling transparency talks. One will be next Wednesday here in Richland Center at the Brewer Public Library from 5 to 7. So that's Wednesday, June 17th. And the intention is to help people understand, basically pull back the curtain a bit and help people understand this is the committee process. This is the legislative process. This is how a bill does come to pass or not, so that people understand why things don't get done, and then how they can help move things along if they care about something, so that their voices get heard in the legislature, so that we move more expeditiously on things that are important to people.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important, and a lot of us kind of wonder sometimes when you hear about it, it goes to the Senate, then the Assembly, or vice versa, sometimes, and why that happens and how that happens. I guess you're going to try to explain that.
Yeah, exactly, because when I came in, I didn't really understand it either. I'm not an aficionado of the governmental process, and so I had to learn exactly kind of the machinations of what happens with a bill, how it first comes to the point of getting co-sponsorship, and then how it gets put to a committee, and then in the committee how it ends up getting a hearing or not, things like that, because all of those steps matter before it can get voted on in the Senate, and then it also would need to get voted on in the Assembly, and if it gets passed there, then it goes to the governor, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all these steps along the way, and it really matters who's in charge. It really matters who gets the bill, what committee, and it really matters what constituents are paying attention to, and then informing their legislators that are representing them what they care about, because that can help push a bill for a hearing or for a vote in a way that otherwise, if they don't hear about it, the legislators, they might not care about it.
One of the things that I've always heard, whether it's a company, whether it's a team in sports or whatever, it's if you're not worried about who gets the credit, you're a leader, you don't worry about who gets the credit. And that's what it always seems like is the problem in politics, Sarah.
Well, I would agree with you at the moment. But what I know is that the Republicans, and I'm not trying to be negative here, I'm just trying to be factual. The Republicans have had control of the legislature, so the Assembly and the Senate, for 15 years. And so they get to decide what bills are even given a hearing. And so what I've understood is that if it is a bill that is authored by a Democrat, less than 1% get a hearing because it is right now, it is about who's going to get quote unquote credit, right? So if you have a good idea and if you're willing to say, hey, Republican, will you do this bill? Sometimes they will, or they'll take a bill that somebody else did maybe the session before as a Democrat, and they'll take it and they'll author it themselves. Fine. I don't need my name anywhere. Literally, I don't need my name anywhere. What I want to be able to do is vote for good things that help people, right? And so, but right now, that's not really what I'm experiencing. I'm literally experiencing blockades for good bills. For example, I had a bill that was to ban hedge funds from purchasing single-family homes. I authored it. It got nowhere, right? And now all of a sudden I'm hearing Tom Tiffany open up to that idea, right? Well, if it's such a great idea, why didn't we pass it way back, months ago when I authored it? Well, because I'm a Democrat and I'm not in charge and the Republicans are. And so that's an example of, it's kind of clear then, right? It's not about good ideas, it's about who's in charge. And that just makes me sad. So my goal and what I've said to my party, right, is if we get to be in charge, I fundamentally disagree with this way of working where if it is authored by the opposite party, that it doesn't get a hearing. I will not participate in that. If I am a chairperson of a committee, I will hear any bill that I think is good. And I have gotten the commitment from my Democratic colleagues for the same thing. We don't want to continue this dysfunction. We want good things for our constituents. And so they have given me their word that if we get in charge, we will not behave like that. I will hold them to their word because I don't want to become part of a system that remains dysfunctional when I've promised that I will not be part of that to every extent that I can.
Well, we want to tackle the other news topic here in the last few months, the $1.8 billion surplus bill to help, among other things, special education and some rebate checks and things like that. And you voted no. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Wow. That was a really tough vote, to be honest with you. There's nothing more that I want to do in this position than vote for things that are good for constituents and that help them at a really basic level. And initially, when I read this, so we didn't get to be part of the negotiations on this. Unfortunately, the Democrats didn't. So it was the governor and two men in leadership, Republicans that lead the Senate, and Voss, who leads the Assembly. They worked on it. Those three men, all retiring, mind you, worked on it for some time, but we weren't involved in the discussions. But we asked to be involved in the discussions because we fundamentally feel like we have good ideas also, and wanted to make sure that whatever they were creating as a bill that we could get behind. Pardon me. Unfortunately, we weren't included. So when we did finally hear the bill, it was on a Monday, and initially it looked kind of good, right? It was like, oh, money for schools, and like you said, it was tax rebates, and it was going to bring down maybe property taxes and such. And so, like at first glance, it looked really nice, and then we asked for information. So I'm not a budget guru, like I'm not an accountant. And so for me, I really need to then get experts that know our monetary, our budget, our appropriations, all of that, to help me understand like the logistics of something like that. And so that's what we did. We, as a party, as a caucus, and we brought in the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is a nonpartisan agency that helps with our budget. And they basically just tell you the numbers, right? Numbers are numbers. And so what we learned at that conversation, and I think that was that Tuesday then that we had them come in. So the Monday we heard about it, Tuesday we get them to come in and share with us. And what they talked about was the fact that this budget the surplus that they were talking about spending was a projected surplus. And so we bandy about this number of billions of dollars available, but that's projected by the end of our next biennium, or of this biennium, which would be June 30th. That's what is projected, but that's not guaranteed money. And given that we have, since those negotiations for this bill started, since we have gotten into the war with Iran, there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, in what's going to happen economically, and there's a number of things that have been put in the one big beautiful bill that are also coming to fruition over the next couple of years. So we had to think about, okay, where do we stand now, and where are we projected to stand, and what will that maybe look like, because all these numbers are just like nebulous, right? The other thing that we had to figure out or learn about is that because we have a bill that is a budget bill that was passed in 2026, 2025, goes for a biennium, that money was already allocated, but we've also passed some bills in the last biennium that spent more money. So we had to consider that money. So we had to consider, A, we don't know how much surplus we are going to get. B, we already have spent some of the money in the allocations, and the one big beautiful bill is still coming. So when we looked at that, what we saw was that if we passed that bill, that surplus spending bill, that at the end of the next biennium, we would have a budget deficit of $2.9 billion with nothing changing. So if we passed it and nothing changed, that is what we would have, is a budget deficit of almost $3 billion. What that means, because we have to have a budget every biennium, it has to be constitutionally, it has to be equalized, right? We can't have a deficit in a budget, so we have to then figure out, where are we going to cut programs? Where are we going to raise revenue? Potentially taxes, right? And so that's why ultimately, when we looked and took a deeper dive, we were like, oh my, right? We can't set up our state like that. That just would be fiscally irresponsible. And that's why there was bipartisan disagreement about it. Even people that were, running for governor, for example, on both sides of the aisle, were saying, hey, that would be not a fiscally appropriate thing to do, because whoever does take over then the governorship will be in that situation of behind the eight ball for our fiscal health, which isn't good for our state. So we then said, right, once we got that information, we still hadn't voted yes or no. We said, hey, let's participate then in some negotiations now to say we can't spend that much, right? Or we can't spend it maybe in all those ways. How about if we talk about some negotiations about maybe there's less here, or this is not as long of a period of time, or there are negotiations that could have happened. We were denied an opportunity for those negotiations. It was sort of believed initially that Republicans had enough votes that they would just pass it without our help. Turns out they had 3 Republicans in the Senate that said no to it because of some of these issues. They needed our votes as Democrats to pass it. And we said we need to be part of the negotiations to make some changes. They simply said no, and they said we're going to force a vote on Wednesday, right? We got it on Monday, forced a vote on Wednesday. And we said no. And so I said no. And what I stand by is the fact that that would have been a bad decision for our state. However, I am not against renegotiating, because we still can, right? We can have a special session, an extraordinary session, and we can still negotiate a better deal. One that Republicans and Democrats that are in the legislature and will be in the legislature after these 3 fellas retire, where we will have the responsibility of managing that. And we are willing to do that. Now, we as Democrats, once again, we do not have the ability to call a special session. Republicans do. So we have been asking them, please do. Let's talk. Let's have more negotiations. So far, they have not asked us to the table. They have not opened us up for those discussions. And so therefore, we don't have a new bill that we could pass.
I know there have been some Republicans that are vocal about wanting, hey, let's get back to session. Let's talk about that. What's it going to take if you're going to get back to the table?
It would just take an opening and inviting us to the table to have those conversations. Our door is open. We are ready to sit at the table, but we will not take that bill. That bill is not appropriate or fiscally responsible. But we are willing to have conversations about some of the budget surplus that we may have and how to best spend that, especially for our schools. But we couldn't have that package in that way without feeling like we were setting our state up in a really dire way.
I know there was a Marquette poll that said it was like 80% of Wisconsinites thought it should have been passed, but are we not getting all the facts, all the truth, people that respond to that? I mean, what is your opinion?
Well, I think that 80% is probably like me, right? That like I liked it at the front end too. Like I thought it sounded good. I heard we had a $2.5 billion surplus and it was going to spend 1.8 and oh my gosh, woohoo, right? But when you dig into the numbers and you understand that we've already spent some of that money, that we have this uncertainty happening, that the big beautiful bill is still coming, that our surplus numbers are only projected, and and we're looking then at a deficit because some of these things we're spending so much money. I think when I've talked to people and I've explained all those things, I think people have been still frustrated. Like, can't we get something? I'm frustrated too, but they do understand that this wasn't the thing. This wasn't it, but that doesn't mean something couldn't be possible. But when you're given a binary choice, right? This or nothing, unfortunately, I had to vote for nothing, but I want something. Just not that one.
Mm-hmm. So maybe in some areas, if they reduce it a little bit,
you bet.
Something?
Yeah, let's change some things in it. You bet. Even if we had to reduce some of the stuff that we were spending for schools, maybe that needs to happen, right? Maybe we need to have income caps. Right now, the rebate was going to go to everybody. There was no income cap on it, right? But it would also not go to about a third of our population in Wisconsin, those people that are seniors or maybe have less income and don't pay into income tax. They wouldn't get anything. So like some of the people that really need it the most were going to get nothing. And again, that's sort of the nuances of this bill that are more complicated than the surface, the way it looked.
Interesting. Welcome back. Great conversation with Sarah Keyeski, who's a state senator in our area representing us, and we'll be back with more on the morning show in just a moment. Senator Sarah Keyeski, our guest here on WRCO's Morning Show for her regular visit here with our program. We appreciate that. So how do you see the governor's race? I mean, right now, no one really has, it doesn't seem like anybody has a real strong opinion. It's kind of hard to focus on any one person, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think I think it's an embarrassment of riches on the Democratic side, honestly. I really like many of them. I think they have good ideas. I think they're well suited for the role. I think smart and capable. So I'm just hopeful that people begin to rally around someone and we can lift them up and bring them forward. But yeah, I think it's tricky because there's a lot of good ones. Mm-hmm.
It'll get narrowed down, obviously, but I think that's right now, kind of the problem in some ways for the Democrats because you don't have, it seems like, a clear-cut favorite, do you?
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be the Democratic state convention here coming up soon. So I'm hopeful that somebody sort of, or a couple people kind of, rise to the top, and then people can kind of really get a sense of where they want to put their effort and their time and their money in supporting a candidate. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
You've been on the job for like a year and a half now, I think. In this
full
office.
year and a half.
Full year and a half. Highlights so far?
Oh, highlights. Gosh, one of the things I really love about this job is that it is different every day. And I love to learn. I am just like a sponge. And so I wish my brain was a better sponge and I like trapped it all and I remembered everything. I don't do that, unfortunately, but I love to learn. And so I absolutely love going out in the district and doing tours and having conversations and meeting with people and learning about what's important to them. I am fascinated by the number of things that I don't know anything about, but people are deeply invested in, and ways in which government can be helpful, because I think government gets a really bad rap, and in some ways understandably, but I've also been really enamored by the things that government can do to move things forward that are helpful for people. Maybe it's the Meals on Wheels grants. Maybe it is, bringing farm to table, getting some of the goods from farms, getting them into schools or hospitals, being able to see some of the prevention of making sure that we have healthy water, and who's like some of the things that you just don't think about because it isn't an issue, maybe, for example, but it's not an issue because the government, right, or maybe let's say a particular agency is on the side of prevention. And so you don't see it as an issue because they're involved in making sure that it's healthy for us, right? And so I don't know, I just find it so fascinating. I really love it. Most recently, I was doing a day in the life, sort of, at a training facility as a firefighter. And that was so eye-opening. It was working on what they do as first responders to somebody that might be having a medical issue, to doing a rescue from a vehicle using these big cutters, or being in a house fire trying to find somebody in the dark that might have gotten smoke inhalation and has fallen. You have to find them to save their lives. I mean, we had these simulations, and it was so eye-opening and so impressive to think of the dedication of people on the front lines like that are doing this work with little real praise or recognition of how hard it is, and how scary it can be, but they just are so brave. And so I love all of it. I guess those are all highlights for me.
Good learning experience, though. I mean, we never stop learning sometimes.
Indeed.
But EMTs, that's been certainly a topic too. A lot of underfunding and things like that for ambulances and different medical personnel services too, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I hear literally everywhere I go, because my district, so District 14, it covers almost all of Columbia County, all of Sauk County, all of Richland County, some of Dane, Adams, Juneau, and a little bit of Vernon. So it's a really broad but very rural district. And there are over 80, I think, small municipalities, townships, villages, that kind of thing. And so they're all trying to figure out how to meet the needs of their requirements, and to keep their community solid and hopefully thriving, right, in difficult times. And the money allocated to our small communities in general is just not enough to be able to meet the needs of fire response, EMS, police, right? And so I hear about their challenges to do what they're mandated to do with such a small budget. So one of the things I'm really hoping for is to be able to advocate for more of our state revenues going to our smaller municipalities, so the shared revenue. That's something I think is really important, and I do believe that our small municipalities should have more say over that and what they do locally. Because it's been heartbreaking, honestly, to go to so many meetings and just hear how much they're struggling to just be able to afford the bare minimums, to do, road repair, to do infrastructure things with such little money, but so many needs.
Mm-hmm. Do you represent your old area, Cashton area?
I don't.
I was going to say, it must be pretty close, though, right?
Yeah, it is pretty close. It's funny because Brad Paff, who is a Democratic senator, he is the person that represents that area. And I didn't know him before running for Senate. And it turns out he knows all kinds of my family. He was at my uncle's farm many years ago for an event with the governor, and so So my maiden name is Everson, and so there's a bunch of Eversons over there, and so it's been very fun because he knows much of my family and he knows where I come from, and he teases me a bit about it. But unfortunately, I don't represent them. But he's a good man that we share many of the same values, and so I can see why he's a good fit there, and I'm proud to say he's a great colleague for me.
Oh, we talked about it during the break, but I think your farm background certainly sometimes helps you a little bit in that work ethic, hopefully, and things like that, doesn't it?
Well, as we were talking. You asked me about if I take a vacation during the summer, and I was mentioning that my staff kind of tried to put something in my schedule for me because I'm not used to taking a vacation. And you said maybe that's your farm background, and I said, I think you're right. We didn't take vacations when I was growing up. That just wasn't a thing you could do. So it just doesn't occur to me, honestly. And so, yes, so I learned a very strong work ethic. My parents both. My dad has since passed away, but my mom is still an avid, active human, doing volunteer work and helping people at the church and all kinds of things. And so I think that that's just ingrained in me, and I like being in service. And so for me, like, volunteering is literally something I really enjoy. And so people are like, well, do you take downtime? And I'm like, well, the thing is what I would do during my downtime is volunteer. And so now when I can go volunteer for this job, it's like really enjoyable for me. If you ask me to flip pancakes somewhere or fill, boxes for people that are needing something from the food pantries, I'm all in because I love that kind of stuff. And so I guess I just feel really lucky that the job I have right now is so enjoyable that I don't necessarily feel like I need to flee it very much for vacation time.
Does your family ever put bugs in your ear like, Sarah, you need to work on this bill, or you need to pass this? This is going to benefit the farmers or whatever? Did your family put pressure on you or not?
Well, I think because my family, they are small farmers. I mean, they all have small family farms. They are concerned about the fact that, the big agricultural industrial complex, right, is getting more of the breaks and the tax rebates and the funds and the grants and the things. And it's our small family farms that are really getting less attention, and their needs are great. This economic destabilization with the tariffs, with the war in Iran, has really, really devastated our small farms and, their ability to take out loans, their ability to pay back their loans. And the thing that I know, people say, well, they voted for Trump. This is something that I hear. They voted for Trump, and so, what do they expect and such and such. I guess I'm against that idea, because I think that one of the things I know, my father was a farmer. My father was one of the smartest people I knew. He had to understand weather. He had to understand machinery. He had to understand commodity markets. He had to understand trade. He had to understand, conservation efforts. He had to understand so much. He is a smart man. And so I don't fundamentally believe that farmers are not smart. I think they have believed that this person, Trump, at the presidential level, cared about them, and he made a lot of promises. But I think it's becoming quite clear. He was just in Chippewa Falls, and he started talking about his reflecting pool. He was at this big multi-million-dollar farm. I think people got to see that the small farmer is not who he cares about. And I'm hoping that then they start to recognize maybe how to vote differently. I'm not saying that that Republicans are all bad or that Democrats are all good. I don't mean it that way, but I think if you look at factually what's happening versus what you feel, right? Feelings are great, but if we look at facts and if we look at statistics and if we look at what's actually happened, I think it's very clear that this person in the presidency has not been good for farmers. Suicides have gone up. Bankruptcies have gone up. Inability to pay loans has gone up. That isn't because he cares. That is because he doesn't care enough, and the impact of his decisions and the negative consequences to farmers is less of his care than maybe building a ballroom. And that's tragic.
I believe he said in Chippewa Falls that would get better in 3 months. I believe
Well,
that
he's been saying that, right? He's been saying he's made a lot of promises. And again, I think there is hopefulness, and I think that's a wonderful thing, is to have hope. But at some point, where is it just empty words, right? Where is it empty words? Because this has been stuff he's been talking about for over 10 years, right? He hurt them his first administration with his tariffs. He's hurting them again. Maybe not all of them. Maybe some that are, have these big industrial, agricultural, monopolies are doing well. But when you see farmers desperate, considering, right, going into bankruptcy, considering selling their land to build a data center because they don't have the money and they're desperate, even though I think fundamentally that's a really difficult decision, right? But they're between a rock and a hard place. Then when you look at that and you really look at the facts, I think it's very clear that farmers are more of a prop than they are people of concern. And that, for me, breaks my heart because, like I said, I have a heart for the farming community, especially small family farmers, because the people that are getting hurt are my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, my neighbors, my church-going members. Those are the people I see getting hurt, and they're my constituents, some of them, and it's pissing me off.
Well, I know you're a counselor by trade as well. Are we making progress? Groups like Farmer Angel Network and things like that in terms of the mental health of our agriculture people?
Well, I think that one of the things that's been great is that we're working on destigmatizing the idea that our mental health, our emotional health, needs to be separate from our physical health. And so we're recognizing that we're a whole being, right? We have emotions, we have physicality, and both need to be tended to. And so I think that idea that, anxiety is a real part of being human, right? And the uncertainty at the level, like I said, at the economic level right now, uncertainty breeds anxiety. That's just a truism. And so, recognizing, well, it is not unmasculine to have anxiety. It is human to have anxiety, right? So we just need to recognize that that's not male, female, that's not weak, strong, like it's just reality, right? And so then we can then have honest conversations about it, and we can say, okay, it makes sense why there's so much angst. How do we manage that then? What do we do about that? And part of that is being in community, being able to talk about it instead of repress it, right? Being able to acknowledge it. Some of that is power, right? Being able to label it, to understand it, to be able to know how to control it maybe a little bit better. That gives us some ability to manage and gives us some power, if you will, back. And being in community in that, I think, is really powerful. So that's the community part of farming that I think is lovely, is that we can really lean on one another and say, this is really a hard time. So are we doing better? I think we're trying, but statistics are not great. Right? What I will say is the 988 number, that is the suicide prevention line that has been around for a couple of years. What we've seen is 11% reduction in suicides since that's come along. Now, that's not necessarily farmer specific, but that's over the broad scope. Those are really important numbers. That means something. And so we're recognizing a benefit there. But I think our community, our society just needs to continue to move toward this just base understanding of how humans operate, the neurology we all have, the physiology we all have, and then how to best address that, and to recognize that there's a lot of normalcy in struggles. We don't need to feel ashamed about them. We just need to get them addressed.
Data centers, too. You mentioned that briefly. Anything new you've learned on those and that topic?
I would say that data centers are a really hot topic of concern, because right now in the state of Wisconsin, we have absolutely no guardrails. None. For pricing, for land acquisition, for water usage, and so without guardrails, honestly, I think the data center are really eager to be in Wisconsin. And so there's a lot of push to come here and to build. And we had a bill, Democrats did, that did get a hearing, but it did not get any further than that provided some accountability, some transparency as a start line. And that was we put that forward back last year, last year, 2025. And it didn't get any movement, again, because of who's in charge. So my hope is that we get something moving really quick the next session, because we desperately need to have some formalized guardrails on this. Otherwise, I think we're going to be taken advantage of. And I think this is a monstrosity that we need to be very, very careful about, thoughtful about, and recognize where the state needs to provide some boundaries so that municipalities can make decisions about what they want to do for their area, their land, their water, etc. But we need at a state level to do some of the fundamental basics so that smaller municipalities are not having to make these big advanced contracts that then are really hard to manage because they're a small municipality working against multi-billion-dollar companies that have a lot more obviously power than they do.
Your transparency talks are coming up, including one right away tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, I have one in Portage tomorrow from 5 to 6. And then I have one next week here in Richland Center. And then the following week on Thursday in Lodi.
You just want people to come out, and I think you appreciate hearing from them, listening to what they have to say, right?
I do. I really appreciate having conversations with people. And that means people that maybe disagree with me too. I'm open to having conversations with anyone. I don't pretend to know all things. I don't pretend to determine that everything I think and believe is 100% right for into infinity. I am eager to learn more, and if there are places where somebody wants me to understand something deeper or differently, share that with me. I'm open to that. Now, I may or may not change my mind, right? Some people say, oh, don't change your mind, then you look like a flip-flopper. In my mind, I look like somebody that's willing to grow, right? And so if somebody, wants to share information with me, either for something that we agree on or something we don't, I'm okay with that. I really am. I think those kind of conversations are really valuable. So everybody's invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as people are respectful, I think, it's, you can have a civil conversation. That's the main thing, right?
Yeah, I think that right now, unfortunately, the way that people interact, in particular on social media, behind a keyboard, has gotten really, really ugly. I mean, I've even gotten threats, like literally. And so I don't take that lightly, because I have a family, and because we know that there was a Democratic legislator in Minnesota that was shot and killed with her husband and her dog. So I don't take that lightly. But I also am not going to hide, right? I have to do my job. And so I am going to go and talk to people and be willing to have conversations, no matter who is wanting to have those conversations. But yes, I do ask that people are respectful, right? That do that with decency, right? And then I'm happy to speak with anyone. If you're going to name call, if you're going to threaten, that kind of thing, I will be walking away. Mm-hmm. I have boundaries.
Yeah, we all do.
We all should.
A final note here. We've talked about a lot of serious things, but when you're driving around the district, what's Sarah's jam? What do you listen to?
Oh my gosh,
music.
I am such a nerd. I listen to podcasts.
Podcasts,
honestly, yes,
yeah, okay.
I listen to podcasts all the time.
No music though, no jams.
The music I like is modern folk music. Okay. I love folk music. It's my favorite. And so if I do listen to music, it's usually that. But I got to be honest, it's usually some kind of political podcast or something where I'm learning something. Again,
Right.
I'm a little bit of a sponge.
Or WRCO, too.
Yes,
Yeah.
often. Oh, sorry. They are always on.
Sarah, thanks so much for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much,
Good to
Bill.
see you.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Senator Sarah Keyeski, the 14th Senate District, here on WRCO's Morning Show.